Hey, picking up on Ben's point, Isaac, NBC's Gary Grumbach reports one of the panels last night at CPAC was titled "Giving Liz the Biz." It was co-hosted by Jim Jordan, and it just went on and on about Liz Cheney. Clearly, there is a higher degree of LCDS, Liz Cheney derangement syndrome, among these attendees there at CPAC, but not just at CPAC, as we've seen elsewhere around the country. Why Liz? What is it about her that they feel so compelled to push back up against?
She won't go along with Trump. She won't go along with saying that he won the election, and she won't stop. She's leading the, really even more than the Democrats on the January 6th committee, has been leading that investigation, has become the public face of it, and by far the most prominent person in the party who's standing up and saying, this is wrong, and we can't let this happen. And Trump has made clear from the beginning that he wanted to pick off all 10 of the House Republicans who voted to impeach him the second time after the insurrection. They just picked off another on Tuesday in Michigan, Peter Meyer, who lost his primary, and Jackie Butler in Washington is in danger of not making the top two. And Liz Cheney has her primary coming up in a week and a half, and she's next on the list, and the biggest prize of all, as they see it, because she's really kind of made it her political identity in the last 2 years.
Sharmichael, I want to play for you a little bit of what the Hungarian leader Viktor Orban said yesterday during his appearance at CPAC, just because I think it's important that our viewers know exactly what those folks at CPAC were cheering on.
I am an old-fashioned freedom fighter. Politics, my friend, are not enough. This war is a culture war. We were the first ones in Europe who said no to illegal migration and stopped the invasion of illegal migrants. We had to build not just a physical wall on our borders, but a legal wall around our children to protect them from the gender ideology that targets them. To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
So, Sharmichael, is this what the Republican base wants? Just culture wars all day long, build a border wall, fear of migrants, throwing trans and gay and lesbian individuals out of the country. What is this where the party is right now?
I mean, look, for a long time, Chairman Steele, and you and I have discussed this in private many times before, conservatives have argued for, I guess, 2 decades now that in many ways, at least since Newt Gingrich and his great takeover during the Clinton years, sort of ceded the cultural wars to Democrats. And many within the activist rank of the party have argued as a result of that. This is why you're seeing sort of some of the cultural normative changes that we're seeing today. Therefore, Republicans need to begin to hit back against those things. It's not my perspective. That is certainly what it appears to be the temperament of the party thus far. I guess the question and concern that I have with this, even as a conservative and being a traditionalist in many ways, is that we do live in a very diverse society. And a part of living in a diverse society is recognizing that you have to be amenable to change. It's an innate part of human nature. The great late Roger Scruton, a conservative British philosopher, wrote often about this idea, particularly when describing what was going on in the United States as it pertains to conservatism and the unwillingness to be amenable at all to any type of cultural changes, which may indeed be to the benefit of the progress of the country. And that's what you're seeing. And so I think about, in many ways, my grandparents. I think about my great-grandparents, and I think about some of the cultural arguments that they were having during their generations. And while the arguments have sort of, I guess, updated, if you will, because of certain things that we're dealing with today versus then, in many ways, the premise of the arguments remain the same. And that is, if you don't look a certain way, of a certain ethnic background, of a certain religious pedigree, if you will, then you are not an acceptable member of our society. And we thought we defeated this stuff during my great-grandparents' time. We did not. We thought during my grandparents' time we were still alive. We did not. And I'm 32 years old, and here we are still having, in many ways, the same type of conversations with similar people about who's acceptable and who's not acceptable in our country. It is an appalling reality about the face of our country. And Chairman Steele, we have to deal with this. This cannot be the argument when my kids become of age. And I'm afraid that indeed may be the case.
I'm afraid you're right. And it really kind of leads, Ben, to one of the, I think, more damning aspects of what we are witnessing going on in Texas at CPAC. And that is the fact, to Shermichael's point, we've now taken this narrative and we've, embraced it globally about other, right? And I want for a moment for you to sort of, because you've been in the political space, you've been inside an administration, I want you as someone who's worked in American foreign policy, who's worked on promoting democracy abroad, not from a political standpoint. I want to get it all into politics. I just want you to react from the sensibilities that you've seen domestically and globally of the sight of an authoritarian European leader giving a speech in the United States, in Texas, being cheered on by Americans who know his background is one of white nationalist racism, and getting a standing ovation from that crowd. What does that say to you that is both concerning, and what should we do about it, if anything?
So it's a tearing down of the example that America sets for the world. And I think an important way of thinking about this, Michael, is that the most famous speech that Viktor Orban ever gave was not the one at CPAC. In 2014, he gave a speech in which he said that the future belonged to what he called illiberal democracy. And he said that the world should no longer look to the United States to set the model for the rest of the world. It should look to Russia and China. That's who he name-checked. Autocratic models, right, of government. That's what Viktor Orban aligns with. That's the team that he's on. And so it has profound implications because it's not just tearing down democracy. It's tearing down the entire system that emanates from American democracy of rules and norms and international order. It's saying we're going to junk all of that system, and we're going to go all the way back to the pre-World War days where you just had big ethno-nationalist powers who duked it out. And that's what we're seeing in Ukraine. That's the actualization of that vision. We know where European blood and soil fascism leads. It leads to the subjugation of minority populations inside of countries, and it leads to conflict. So the stakes are really high. And to respond to that, we have to connect the defense of democracy in this country to a global defense of democracy that is under assault right now.
Ben, thank you for that clarifying moment. I want to thank all of you for the clarification that you've brought to our conversation. Ben Rhodes, Isaac Arnsdorf, and Shermichael Singleton, thank you guys so much for starting us off. When we come back, an update into the January 6th investigation, the first signs of ex-President Trump fearing an indictment. New reporting that his legal team is in talks with the Justice Department. Plus, arguably a very good week for Democrats in the White House. The president announced the killing of one of the masterminds of 9/11. Voters made themselves heard on abortion. The jobs market is in place, not at a place it's not been in since before the pandemic. And they're on the cusp of signing a new, pretty significant piece of Biden's agenda. How Democrats carried through to November? Well, we'll talk about that. And later in the show, we're going to talk about Trump's hold on the party. But at the same time, there's new evidence to suggest Republicans are a little bit weary about a 2024 run. All those stories and more when Deadline White House continues after this. Don't go anywhere.
Research shows that people remember ads with young people having a good time. So to help you remember that Liberty Mutual customizes your home insurance, here's a pool party.
Look what I brought! Liberty Mutual. They customize your home insurance.
So you only pay for what you need.
Young people